attending today. Hopefully we'll get into some overview here about environmental metrics. I'm going to share my screen here. So that's my first obstacle that hopefully I'll be able to navigate here. Let's try this out. My second obstacle would be if my dogs start barking in the background. So I might have to hit the mute. Hopefully that doesn't go too badly here. So let's get into what I'm like to talk about here is just environmental metrics overview. I've talked to the council and the safety council before over the years with safety topics and environmental topics. And typically it's a lot of very compliance driven things, right? Where there's a rule out there, there's a standard or a regulation, and you sort of have to follow it for a variety of reasons. The environmental metrics is a little bit different, whereas it's not a compliance driven type of activity. It's really coming from a few different ways. And so I'd like to chat about that quickly. And the agenda here is just to talk about what that means. What do these environmental metrics mean? Why they might be important in your market, in your business? Why would you even want to do this and keep these environmental metrics? What's the purpose of this? And then I actually have a few examples of how to do it. I have a couple sheets that we've used in the past, some software that we've used, and actually give you a real quick dive into the process of how to track some of these metrics. And then what do you do with them? A lot of companies are reporting these, and depending on where you're at in your environmental journey, we may not have to do that all the way, but we want to tell you what some of these businesses are doing. So the key, like Lori had mentioned in my intro there, the key that I'd like to talk about really is these environmental metrics give you value. Obviously, anything you want to do in business is got to come from it's got to give you some type of value statement. Whoops, sorry about that. And that value statement has to be a good reason to do it. So are you going to do this just to save costs? Are you doing it just because someone's telling you? Well, some of these environmental metrics, they give you both. They give you a bottom line cost savings because, as we know, there's that old adage of what gets measured gets managed much better. If we're measuring different types of environmental metrics, typically we're going to manage those better. We're going to keep a close eye on them, and that's a huge benefit in itself. No doubt about that, and that's great. And that's sort of the first step. I think that we want to make sure everyone knows you can save costs just by starting to prioritize and look at some of this data. And then the top line value is what we see a lot more in the industry, in the workplace, in the business scape right now. And so I'll touch on it real briefly, not to get too deep into it, but it's becoming a strategic reason for tracking these metrics and then also reporting it. And some places it's actually required to report these. So before we get any further, just a quick background of what is an environmental metric. What am I talking about? It's basically data, a bunch of data points that can be collected from your organization, and basically what the impact is from a variety of different environmental categories, like all these shown here. Of course, not a complete list, but we can be tracking gallons of water used at a wash line. We could be tracking the air emissions coming out of a paint coating booth. We could be tracking the chemical used even at a small amount, even in a commercial office space, what types of chemicals might be involved. It all depends on what you want to track. Can't track everything in the world, but after prioritizing what might be important for your organization, these types of categories can be looked at. And it all in all adds up to, we've all heard the term sort of like your carbon footprint or your environmental impact footprint. It's all these inputs and outputs coming from environmental categories. So again, so many different things you can track, so much data we can get, but the question is, why would we want to do it in the first place? Of course, big business, any business, we don't want to be just doing things just for the fun of it, or just because you think it might be interesting to do. There's always reasons why we're doing things, especially in the environmental and safety realm. And number one, obviously we got to look at if there's things that are compliance driven, regulatory driven. If the EPA tells us we have to track certain environmental things to comply with the permit, there you go. There's a legal reason why we've got to do that. That's pretty simple, cut and dry, right? So that's obviously at the near the top of our list here. There's also very important, and this is what we've seen a big uptake in the business-scape lately, and that's that number 2, stakeholders, especially customers. Most of these environmental, I would say, and I'll start adding the term sustainability, meaning different types of environmental and community impacts that you're measuring. Most of these things now are coming from customers. What we've seen is whatever we're supplying or doing or servicing for a customer, they are then in turn asking in the supply chain for you to tell us some of the things about your business, right? They're asking for, are you tracking these certain environmental metrics? And so in some cases, we've seen surveys from customers. This is actually where a lot of times our company, our consulting firm gets involved a lot of times from a company contacting us saying, we've gotten a survey from a customer or we've gotten a customer audit, and they're asking us about X, Y, and Z. They're asking us about our carbon footprint and CO2 emissions. They're asking us about ISO 14000 and environmental management, objectives and analysis. Can we get into that? Obviously, if your customer is asking for it and saying, tell us what you're doing, it becomes very important, right? So there's a real important why right there. And really, like I said, it's the number one reason lately that we see an uptick in more and more tracking and attention on environmental metrics. So think about that. That comes from sales staffs, from purchasing people, from again, customer audits and quality. All those things are coming up more and more. And this is why some companies need to be prepared if they're not already getting asked for these types of things. There could be an internal goal, corporate goal, policy driven. Maybe your CEO has put it out or something. And then a voluntary standard like an ISO 14001. That's another topic for another day, but a voluntary standard that you might just take in. We've even heard about some places that the employees are driving this. They're saying, what can we do to report or track what we're doing for the community or what we're doing to improve our impact? All those things. These are the why. These are the why statements. So this might be something, and I guess I would put out to a challenge to all of us, all the participants today, is after this, go back, write this down, go back to your company and think, do we have any of these whys in our organization yet that makes us want to be prepared? Being prepared for this might reduce the risk of you getting caught unprepared, and especially with a customer demand, something we want to think about. All right, moving along. Thing that is very tied to this environmental metrics and tracking these things and actually putting resources and time behind it is your market. It depends on what market you're in. If you're in the automotive market, manufacturing, anything international related right now, you've definitely already heard about these types of requests or these types of demands, but maybe your different market may not be at that level yet where you're reporting on environmental metrics. That's fine. One thing that I think everybody should know, and it's a good quote, a good stat that I wanted to throw out, 92% of companies on the S&P 500 published a CSR, I'll tell you what the CSR report is, a sustainability report in 2020. 92, that's everyone. Every big company is publishing a sustainability report or they're tracking environmental metrics and putting it out for the public to see. This is, of course, raised every year, as I mentioned there. So that's fine. You might say, well, I work in an office, commercial place, or I work in a small company here in Orville or whatever that is. Well, that may be well and good, but again, think of the supply chain impact. You may be eventually getting asked by the customers that you're supplying things to. So again, something that we want to make sure that we're aware of and trying to be prepared. Oops, see here. So CSR reporting, sustainability reporting, environmental, social governance, all these things are potential things that are basically just a fancy way of saying that you're publishing your environmental impacts, you're publishing your environmental reporting. A CSR report is a real nice, this could be a 20, 30 page, 50 page type document, nice color, published on your website. A full CSR report talks about all these different types of categories that, again, would be important metrics for you to talk about. They may even have some specific standards to it. But it's basically just, you're publishing the results of your environmental impacts on the community. So another example here, here's one page that I kind of like that I pulled out, mostly because it's from Caesar's Palace, which I thought was kind of interesting. But this is a page out of their CSR report that's on their website. It shows a bunch of nice data and some numbers, but it gives a real highlight, a peek into what is really important for that company and that industry. They're very tied into people. They're serving people. They're very tied into water consumption because they're a hotel type chain and all those things. So this can tell some real good data, and it also gives some good examples of what types of companies are tracking. So again, not to get into all the details, just know this is an example of a page of some data on a real nice, CSR report out there. Now, again, CSR report is for another training for another day, but just be aware that there's social governance, there's environmental impacts that might be described in these reports. These are just all these different types of aspects that could be, taken into account when someone is doing a CSR report, all these different environmental reports, and this is just the environmental portion. So again, you can see this is from a PwC report. You can see the different types of things that people are tracking. Now, again, your company may not be tracking, of course, all these different specifics. That's fine. Be aware that you might be starting to might be getting asked for data for in the supply chain to start using your data to roll up into theirs. And that's where some of this takes place. So again, a lot of different good aspects there on that list that we can start maybe picking out a couple of those, and it might get important for us. Okay. So just to pause here, now that you guys are sort of experts now in corporate social governance and sustainability reports from those couple of slides I just showed, let's just say you go back today to your company and you decide that, yes, this is something we need to do in your company. We need to start tracking some environmental metrics and maybe even, reporting on this. Well, where do you start? How do you do this? Again, depending on your market and level of involvement where you want to be, here's where we usually recommend. And we usually recommend what's kind of an ISO approach. If anyone has ISO 9000, which is like the quality management systems, or any type of ISO standard in your workplace, it typically follows a general form like this, where you always have some type of vision, or it creates a policy that says, company ABC, we would like to reduce our environmental impact by, pollution prevention and complying with all of our legal requirements. That may become a policy of your company. And that sort of starts it all and the top of the umbrella level. Whatever is important can be set from a vision and policy, and then things start to fall in place. Objectives and targets can be brainstormed and thought about and planned to support that policy. I'll show you a couple examples here in a minute. All those objectives and targets require getting some data, typically. How do we get that data? How do we roll it up? How do we add it up? And how do we analyze it? And then very importantly, we want to make sure there's some system in place to routinely review this. Even the best, intentions start with a bunch of ideas to track these environmental metrics. But after a year, if no one's really caring about that internally, or there's no reason for us to keep going, it can fall off the page. Okay. And then decide what type of reporting. Are we just putting this on a simple spreadsheet in an email, or are we actually creating a publishable sustainability report? All this stuff is dependent on how far you are on your level. All right, let's get into a couple actual case studies here. Some example projects that we have worked on with some clients. These are mostly manufacturing clients that we worked on. And just to concentrate a couple different categories on a water project, for example, we put some time and thought into how to reduce water. If that was one of the goals of that company, to reduce the water impact, how do we do that? Well, in this case, we found a big cooling tower chiller situation where we could recirculate water instead of using fresh city water into those cooling towers. We were then able to track all the water that was used there for that dedicated cooling tower that was recirculated. We got credit for all that water, and it was taken directly off of a sewer district bill because we were no longer sending that money to the sewer district. And of course, depending on, the scale of this could be a really big deal at a company. I'll tell you a few stats here in a second. A waste project somewhere, they wanted to expand recycling. They wanted to reduce their landfill waste. Basically, they were getting charged extra by the landfill company coming and picking up extra dumpsters, things like that. So we basically developed a segregation program and improved the efficiency, where we figured out almost 40% of all of the waste thrown in the landfill was recyclable. We were able to cut that out of their waste stream. It became recycled. We eliminated all that landfill volume, and also all of that shipping, pickups, all the extra cost and all the extra, we actually eliminated some actual physical dumpsters that were just not needed on the site anymore. Those are all, many layers of benefits that we want to see with all these different projects. And then there was some energy usage where we didn't really know why our bills were going up at a client. We analyzed that. We tried to profile where these processes were using kilowatt hours, and we prioritized those. And all of a sudden, there were big ticket items that we got quick return on investments. And we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't have made this an objective and a target. Okay, so again, a real quick summary of some of those here. That water savings was just from eliminating the sewer costs was a $16,000 savings per year upon year. That stuff just keeps adding up, and it's just a bottom line direct impact. A bunch of different landfill waste savings there in the waste project. Again, year upon year, we're adding those up as a bottom line savings. Plus, we can talk about all the other levels of those values that we said too. Again, reduction in kilowatt hours. We were able to normalize that. And even as we increased production at this company with the energy project, we were seeing more and more reductions of energies. So we're adding all these things up, and there's a way to maybe share that, not only just internally, but share it with our website, with our customers, with our partners, with our stakeholders. All that can start, you can see how this can start feeding into itself and really get the ball rolling in a good direction. Okay, so just a real specific, I actually have the background of one of the spreadsheets a real simple calculation spreadsheet that we used for that one chiller water recirculation fee project. Just a peek behind how we actually kind of recorded, because of course you want to get the idea or think of an objective like this, but we also have to sort of manage that objective. And this is where the rubber meets the road, where we keep pushing this rock up the hill. We have an idea, but if you don't manage it, if you don't write these things down and track them and assign responsibilities, then you can see how easily it can just sort of be forgotten about. Okay. So what we've done here is we had the objective. We had what we would do is we would develop a separate document for all the different targets that would support that objective. We might have several targets, and a target is basically just a specific measurable target to try to hit that actually has monetary or an actual numerical quantitative number tied to it. That's an important part about a target. It's specific, it's measurable, it has a time frame associated with it, and so it doesn't just go on forever, and it's actually quantitative. So we identify what quantitative metric we need. We need gallons of water usage, and we need cost in dollars. So that's our metric. Now we know what data we need to get. We can then develop an action plan. Who's getting the data? Where are they? Oops, sorry about that. Where are they putting it? Who's doing what? Again, any action plan that needs to be implemented to get to that target and objective, we can then manage. And I think in this case, every quarter, we put a deadline in place to have every quarter, we are checking in on this with a management review meeting. We've got it written down. We've got an action plan. We've got some people tied to it, so we can then follow this thing along. So this is just a real simple way. We're using metrics that are defined. We're using it to support a target and objective that we decided was important. Okay. And then this can help also report on the money saved, or the kilowatt hour saved, or the gallons of water, or whatever that is. And then we can in turn maybe turn that into a report or something of another benefit. So just to recap on the process that we talked about at the beginning, like I just said, to repeat, that objectives and target document captured the data we needed, identified and captured the data that we needed. It put in place a established routine review. Every quarter we had to report on that. And then we decided how to report it. It can just live in that spreadsheet if we want, and that's fine. Or we can actually turn it into a newsletter article, or a newspaper article for the community, or an actual website published report. Whatever level you want to get to, the environmental data and the environmental metrics can help support that and get you there. Okay. And then just to sort of summarize here, the other few ways that we do this in our company at Affinity is, again, you can do it on a spreadsheet. We also have some software that we utilize for clients that helps. This is just sort of a quick dashboard that tells you some possibilities. It basically helps identify and show what's in progress. We can track our environmental metrics on these dashboards. We can track compliance things coming up. We have a report coming up. We have a permit required coming up. We have a review of some of those environmental data that we were talking about coming up. All these things we use on the software that we have per client. We have a client specific page that anyone in the company can log into and utilize with the corporate staff or with anyone else. We use it in safety meetings. We use it in management review meetings for ISO. We could bring this up and track who's doing what the tasks are. This is how we also track audits and things like that. Again, just a real quick look here on how it looks, and whoops. And again, a lot of different ways we want to make sure that this is customized on this dashboard of what's important to you. How do we want to portray this? And again, depending on what level we want to get with these environmental metrics, we are able to keep going with cost savings, analyze our waste reduction, energy reduction, and then eventually what would be great if we turn some of these things into actual reports. Maybe we start publishing these things on your website, or actually telling them. I know recently we had a customer audit at one of our clients. One of their customers came in, and we showed them the dashboard and said, this is how we manage some of our EHS metrics. And they basically said, that's all we need to see. We know if you're doing that much, we know you're well ahead of most places. Customers like to see those things, especially on the audits. Okay. So wrap it up here with a review here. There's a bottom line benefit, because it's very easy to show cost savings once you get into some of these really, high priority items, big ticket items. There's a true cost savings that everybody in a company likes, especially your corporate staff. And there's certainly a top line value, especially if your customers or your industry is really starting to look for this and asking for this. This sets you apart. This can be a strategic business goal. And I think anybody can think about what level your company might want to get to. And again, set your company apart competitively, plus make your customers happy, plus save money. That's sort of the sweet spot of all the sustainability, environmental metric stuff, and all the data can help support that. Okay. That's that. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Of course, you can always contact me, but hopefully, at the very least, you guys are thinking a little bit more about maybe being prepared and how you might be fitting in that supply chain with some of these environmental data that might help your company out. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Okay, if there are any questions, please feel free to stick those in the chat. I see that Eric and Lori are still with us, so if you have any questions for them, we'd be happy to entertain those as well. Just a reminder that the Ohio Safety Congress registration is open and free to all employers in the state of Ohio. You do need to have your BWC identification number in order to register. So that is coming up on March 9th and 10th, and we will not have an Orville Area Safety Council meeting in March for that reason. So I'm not seeing any questions pop up. Hopefully you found Keith's information to be helpful to get the conversation started. If you're not already tracking these types of things in your organization, I think there are always new items that we can pay attention to. So help to minimize costs and maximize success in our individual industries. So I want to thank you for joining us today, and we will look forward to seeing you in April at the mega meeting. So have a great week.
Take care. Thanks, Lori.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Lori. Good to see you.